And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to A Bookish Moment. I'm Sarah Burr.
And I am J.C. Kenny. And I tell you, folks, we've got an author here who is representing the South. We're talking in the line of folks like William Faulkner and Harper Lee. So, Sarah, I think it's time to get bookish.
Yes, my favorite thing to be. And as JC said, we have got a treat for you guys this afternoon. We are going to cover a lot of different genres today. However, we are delighted to be joined by the author who has written them all, which is Phyllis Gobbell. She is here celebrating the release of her latest novel, Prodigal. And Phyllis, I believe it is your 7th novel, but it's your first literary fiction that you have written.
That's true. That's true.
Right.
It's great to be here with you.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be here. I want to say thank you to our wonderful viewers who are joining us live this afternoon. In the chat, we've already got Sarah saying hello and Farmhouse Reader saying good afternoon. Folks, if you have any questions for Phyllis as we go through the show, feel free to drop them into the chat. But without further ado, we're going to dive in. Before we start talking about Prodigal and the story of the Burdett family, Phyllis, I would love to have you just kind of introduce yourself to our audience members. Maybe tell us a little bit about your background as on the English faculty as a professor, and kind of what got you into writing in the first place. How did you fall in love with the craft of writing?
Oh, well, I've written all my life, really. And that's a long time. That's a long time. I retired from being on the English faculty about 2 years ago. So I'm
congratulations.
Putting in more time writing, but most of my work was done while I was working. Most of my writing was done while I was working full time. I was born and grew up in a small town, not too different from Montpelier, which is the town in Prodigal. So I feel like if there's one thing I really know about, it's small southern towns. So I live in Nashville now and have lived here for a long time. And that's about it. That's who I am.
Well, Phyllis, I got to tell you, I haven't finished Prodigal yet, but I'm about a third of the way through. And the way the story starts and it builds, it is like it's a mood. It is so atmospheric. And one of the things that was going through my head as I'm reading this is I feel it's like, the book is basically a thunderstorm that is building, and we're just waiting as we go on that something is finally going to kick over and it's really going to just crash in buckets of rain, kind of this slow simmering build in the middle of summer. So if you can't tell, I'm kind of totally digging the book. Tell us a little bit about Prodigal.
Okay, it is about a young man who was involved in a shooting in the year 2000, a shooting in a convenience store. He didn't pull the trigger, but he was a coward and he ran away afterward. And then the story picks up 10 years later when he is coming back, trying to come home, and has to face his past. And there are a lot of secrets and lies and betrayals and new challenges to face. And so it's about him, his family, the town. And I guess at the heart of it, it's about forgiveness. How do you get forgiveness and how do you forgive yourself for things in your past that you wish were not the way they were? Is there possibility for redemption? So that's sort of the the little blurb about Prodigal.
I have to agree with JC about the atmosphere that you've created. I don't know what it is about like a Southern town, Southern fiction. There's just something that like it just feels different than something that takes place in the Northeast or something that takes place out West. And it's something so special. And I'm wondering, Phyllis, if you're able, if you know what that something special is, or what is it about these Southern families, and in particular the Burdettes, where they have this almost like stateliness or like kind of like royal, like a royal air to them with how they operate and how they are perceived within the town.
Well, they are good people. He is a preacher. And I don't know if you'll, ask me this. A lot of people ask, where do you get your inspiration? And I read William Kent Kruger's Ordinary Grace about a small town in Minnesota and a family there, and later heard him speak. And I thought, I can write about a small town in the South. There's some things about small towns that resonate. They're the same anywhere, but there is something special about a small town. And you mentioned in the summer, and all of this is the July 4th. It's July 4th of 2000, then July 4th of 2010, and then July 4th of 2011. And so I think I did that. Why did I do that? I don't know. I think there is something about this little town and the parade and the traditions, the things that carry on. And in the beginning, you said you'd read part of the way, so you read this about how I said that the traditions stay the same, really, but as the town marches itself home after a 4th of July, they almost always mention, well, you remember that shooting, and you remember that, and another 4th of July. So, yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, Sarah. I appreciate that. And you too, Jim, about the mood of it, because I certainly feel that about small towns in the South.
Well, in one of the other things I'm curious about too that I think you really capture is when talking about the Burdette family in particular, you've got this multi-generational thing going. You've got Lady, she's the matriarch, then you got mom and dad, Daniel and Kitty, and then you've got Connor and his siblings. Can you talk about that dynamic? Because that's 3 different generations right there.
Yeah, and that's I guess there's a lot about that relates to a small town too, because I come from a small town, and I go back now and then, and I still have cousins there. A lot of people never leave. They never leave, and they stay there, and they raise their family. And of course, that's what happened with Russ. Russ and his wife Nikki. They didn't leave. They stayed there. And Daniel, the father, who was a preacher, he went away for a while, but he couldn't wait when he got a chance to come back. And I don't find that so much in cities, but there are a lot of multi-generational people in the small town that I know, and so I thought that was pretty typical.
All I know is that the name Lady, the fact that Lady Burdett.
Yeah.
That's her name, but she's also like the matriarch of the family, where it sounds like it's a title of, this grand family. I was like, oh my gosh, I love the imagery that even her name evokes. And just like this collection of really interesting characters that you've put together, that they're kind of weaving their way through dealing with their own guilt and remorse over things that they wish they'd said and whatnot. So much emotion that goes into this. I want to kind of get your thoughts about like how to write these very emotive characters. But first, before we do that, Phyllis, we do have a few more folks chiming in our chat. I want to make sure to say hello to them. We've got DHB saying happy Thursday, and we've got David Plank saying good joining you today. So thank you guys for being here. We very much appreciate it. So as I was kind of alluding to, Phyllis, what's your secret for kind of tapping into the different emotions that your characters are facing? And I'm wondering if you can maybe add a little bit into how does faith play a role into that, because you do have Daniel, the Baptist minister, who is and everybody else is kind of dealing with their relationship to faith and to God. Mm-hmm.
Well, you've asked me like two questions,
yes,
and so
it was loaded. It was a loaded one.
My memory will hold here. I'm going to answer the one about faith first of
Perfect.
all, because Prodigal is a retelling of the biblical story of the prodigal son. Mm-hmm. And of course, the Burdett family is different. They have other members of the family, but anybody, even people who are not churchgoers, have probably heard the story of the prodigal son mm-hmm. coming home, and the father welcoming him, and so joyful that he's home, and then the brother saying, I've been here all along, mm-hmm. and what about me? And so that is certainly that what I did in my book comes from that. And I think in small towns, the church is so central to everything, and almost everybody goes to church, or if they don't go every Sunday, they profess to have a relationship with one of the churches in town, because maybe my parents went there or my grandparents went there. And so I don't think I could have written about a small town without bringing in this religious aspect there. And then the other question you asked, and I do remember, yes, it was about the emotions. Mm-hmm. And I don't do every book this way. In fact, this is the first book that I've ever done with multiple viewpoints. But I will tell you that the first time I wrote this book, my first draft, it was all from Ivy's point of view.
Oh, wow.
And I just didn't like that. It didn't work for me, because there's so many things that when you write from one point of view, Ivy would have had to know a lot of things that she didn't know. Mm-hmm. And you can't go do head hopping like that if you're writing from one point of view. So I would do one chapter in Daniel's point of view, one in Connor's, one in Kitty's, and go back and forth. And that's the way I decided to do it. And that made it pretty easy for me to tap into the emotion, because it's sort of like if you are in taking on a role on stage, you become that person. You become that character on stage for a few minutes. So while I was writing in Kitty's point of view, I sort of became Kitty, and I felt what Kitty felt. And then when I got into Connor's point of view, I became Connor for a moment and felt what Connor felt. So I think that is one way that I can explain the emotion part of it.
Well, I tell you, you for my money, you nailed it. And I just want to say that, especially when we first meet Kitty, she's at home, and I just thought that was an absolute masterstroke when you bring up the point that given when Connor disappeared, and now 10 years in the future, Kitty won't let anybody get rid of the landline, because that's the number. If Connor's ever going to call, that's the number he's going to call. And I, as a parent, that visual, just ripped my heart out, because I just so got that. So I just had to say that was just fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm a parent, and I'm a mother, and a grandmother too, and I could feel that. Yeah, she would know. I believe I said Connor knew that number as well as he knew his own birthday, and so it hasn't been all that long ago that I got rid of my landline, even though I've had a cell phone for a long time. But I thought there are people that still know that number, and then finally it's like, no, I got to do that. But if my kid was out there somewhere, I still wouldn't be rid of it.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I think, speaking to like the authenticity of your writing, Phyllis, like our readers know, or our viewers know how much of a true crime buff I am. And I can't tell you how many times I have listened to something or watched something, and, the parents of the missing victim are like, we still live in the same place. We still have the same phone number. Like, we have to be here in case, our child comes back home. And that always just breaks my heart to know that you have these people who are frozen almost in a moment in time, because they're just like desperately waiting for the return of the people that they're missing. So I thought that, as JC mentioned, like that you just had so many instances in this book that captured these like vignettes of like deep emotion, without really, it wasn't like physical emotion, but like we're feeling it from the characters based on their actions and how they're approaching the situation. And a comment from one of our viewers, we have David Plank saying that they're finding our discussion fascinating. So David, thank you. Glad you're enjoying it. And Phyllis, to the point that we alluded to earlier, where Prodigal is your first foray into a literary fiction, I'm wondering if you can kind of maybe define for us, because our guest that we had earlier in the week, Libby Klein, she kind of taught us about the difference between women's fiction and cozy mystery, even though she had written a mystery in her women's fiction book. I'm curious how the tone setting, the style of writing differs from your literary fiction than it does from something like your Jordan Mayfair mysteries, because you are also, you have 4 books in that series. One of them won the Silver Falchion Award at Killer Nashville, which is a fabulous accomplishment in itself. So maybe just tell us a little bit, like compare, contrast, like how these stories are presented, even though we both have kind of underlying mysteries that are guiding the way.
Well, there's with a mystery, there is a crime at the beginning, very close to the beginning, usually a murder, but sometimes even if the murder doesn't take place for 20 pages, there is something very quickly that has to be made right. There's something wrong. And so the protagonist, in my case, the amateur sleuth, she's going to figure it out. And that's what the book is going to be about. And hopefully the interest is, how is she going to figure it out? Because you don't ever doubt that she will. That is just the way it is. And that's why people like, I guess mine, I call them traditional mysteries. They're, I guess, cozies, and some are cozier than others. But I think Jordan Mayfair likes to make the world right. She wants to make things right again, and that's where you go with the mystery. Well, I taught in college, as I said, taught English and taught literature and creative writing, and I loved teaching literature and looking at thematic ideas. And to me, the thing that makes a literary novel different is there are a couple of things, and one is the more serious nature of it. It's not that a murder can't be serious, but there are thematic elements about life, about that you ponder, and maybe you don't get answers to everything at the end. Maybe you get more questions, but you think about these things when you're reading a literary novel. You, like, I hope in Prodigal, you think about forgiveness and redemption, and should you be forgiven when you do things that are terrible. And so that's one of the ideas, the sort of the serious nature of the literary novel, and also then the language. I think the literary language, and that's something that I always love from the masters, because sometimes you can just linger over a paragraph and say, oh, that is just really beautiful writing. And I don't mean necessarily describing a scene, something like a picturesque scene, but just the way the writer talks about the story and the characters and what they're thinking and what they're feeling, and I think the language that ties into the emotion too. But the literary language is part of it too. You're not just saying this happened and then this happened, this happened, this happened. You're really delving into below the surface and getting people to think about things in a literary novel.
Excellent.
That's my teacherly, my little teacherly.
Yeah.
I feel like we've benefited so much in recent weeks from all of our guests who have appeared, because we just learned so much that's really fascinating about, even as a writer myself, it's like, I don't necessarily know all these things. So hearing it, especially from a professor, is very, very cool. Thank you. I think that explains it for me. So thank you.
Good.
So one of the things, unfortunately, we don't have a lot more time, but I heard a rumor, Phyllis, from a little birdie named Sarah, that in addition to your cozy traditional mysteries and in addition to Prodigal, you also have a background in true crime, which is totally right up little birdie Sarah's alley. So can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Yes, I co-wrote 2 true crimes before I did mysteries or Prodigal, and they were about high-profile crimes here in Nashville, murders. And the first one was about an unfinished canvas, and it was about a young mother and artist who disappeared, and everybody believed her husband did it, but it took 10 years to prove it, and they never found the body, and there's a good reason why, and and the book explains why they've never found the body, but they got a conviction, and it's very hard to get a conviction without a body. And so that was one, and I went around with my co-writer, and we were talking to groups about it, and it was, Nashville was very interested in that case. And somebody said, well, I've read a lot of your short stories and everything, and are you, this is different for you. Are you going to be a true crime writer now? And I said, no, I'm not going to write any more true crimes unless they solve the Marcia Trimble case. And Marcia Trimble was a 9-year-old girl who disappeared in 1975.
Oh, wow.
And 33 years later, I didn't know at that time they had someone in their sights, even when I was saying that.
Oh, wow.
And so that was the one that I co-wrote after that. That was A Season of Darkness, and it was about the Marcia Trimble. And they're very sad, and very Nashville, changed Nashville, really, really big cases in Nashville.
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to dig into those because there's something that, especially these cold cases that get new life breathed into them and are solved, how many ever years later, that always is like, there's always the opportunity for justice and there's always the opportunity for hope. What you had been mentioning, Phyllis, about like in traditional mysteries and cozy mysteries, we have this conviction going in that, hey, like everything's going to work out in the end. Like we're gonna, like the bad guy's going to be caught. And so those instances where we can actually see that play out in real life are always despite being very tragic, it's also like, okay, like there is like that justice in the world. And I just find it so fascinating. As we begin, oh my goodness, I told you our time together was going to fly by so quickly. In our final minutes together, Phyllis, do you have any recommendations, I guess, like for our audience members to let them know like what you're reading, what you're watching, what are you listening to? Any recommendations that folks should put on their to be read, to be watched, to be listened to lists?
I read a lot. I don't watch a lot of television, but I do read. I read Louise Penny. I love mysteries, and I don't know. I guess hers is, it's a literary mystery, I suppose. It's so much, but I love Louise Penny. I love Tana French, and from the Irish, especially her Dublin murder squad, but I like her new ones too. And I read every Ann Tyler book, and she definitely is a literary writer. And she says, "Oh, I just write about a little bit of nothing," and it's just such a pleasure to take that journey with her through the book when she's just telling you all of these details about people's lives. And so those are three that I could recommend. And I've been reading more William Kent Kruger after I read Ordinary Grace. That's still my favorite of his. So those are some recommendations I have. The only television show that I've been watching, I followed Matlock with Kathy Bates this season.
That was so much fun.
That was fun. It was fun. Can't wait to next season.
Yeah. We got a cliffhanger on our hands.
Yeah.
Sarah, how about you? What are you taking in?
In the couple of days since we last chatted, JC, I have delved into, Netflix has a new documentary, true crime documentary on the Tylenol murders, which is something that I very much listened to in podcast form on several different productions. But this is the first time kind of seeing the evidence, seeing the players, seeing the police involvement. There's like also this hint of like how Johnson & Johnson was involved in it. And it takes on a very interesting and like not accusatory tone, but like conspiracy tone, which I'm surprised by. But it's fascinating, and it's wild to see that, that you could buy Tylenol and just like pop open the top, undo the capsules, put stuff in it, and like there was no seal or anything. And I as somebody who struggles on the daily with like child-proof caps and, pulling seals off of things, it's like that was something that changed how like America produced their medication. So I'm fascinated by it. We have one more episode to go, so I'm very interested about the conspiracy part that we're getting into. And JC, really quickly, before we get into your recommendation, I do want to make sure that we point out, I believe David's comment was in relation to talking about your true crime novels, or your true crime stories, Phyllis, where, the cold cases, like we still get that justice after all of this time. David was saying it's what we need. It's what we need now. We need that hope that, that things will be set right. So I just wanted to make sure we point that out. All right, JC, what's new on your end? What are your recommendations?
So recommendations real quick here. The Residents, also on Netflix. It's an 8-part miniseries, whodunit, very odd Poirot-esque investigator brought in to figure out whodunit when the head of the White House staff turns up dead the night of a big state dinner. Ooh. It's funny. It's just amazing. It's check it out. If you got Netflix, you won't be disappointed. And so that's what I got for today.
Fabulous. That's definitely on my to watch list because it looks super fun. Phyllis, in our final moments together, can you let our viewers know how they can stay connected with you or stay like up to date on your bookish endeavors? And if you have any upcoming in-person or virtual events that they can find you at?
Well, the best way, really, you have my website, www.phyllisgobbell.com, and the first thing you see, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the first thing that you see when you go there is like, join my mailing list. And if you're on my mailing list, then I told people on the mailing list about today.
Fabulous.
I posted that. And I did a podcast in December called Bookish Flights, and it's just going to air next week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, I'll put that on there too. I think it's Wednesday or Thursday. Anyway, I will put it up. And so it's really, I'll if I'm doing an event, I'll put that on my mailing list.
Perfect. And folks, Phyllis's website is listed in our show notes, so you can click on that information right from YouTube and be connected to her newsletter. Time flies when we're having fun. Phyllis, thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
Thank you for stopping by and
Thank you.
sharing
Thank
your
you. It's
your
been
story.
a lot of fun.
Good. I'm always glad when people have fun here because that's what we strive for. And folks, Prodigal is available now wherever books are sold. If you buy it and enjoy it, please remember to leave a review for Phyllis. That is the lifeblood for us authors and allows us to continue writing our books. And so we very, very much appreciate our wonderful live audience that joined us here during the show. We appreciate our viewers who watch us after the show, after the fact that we're not live. We always love seeing your comments and appreciate you sharing your time with us. And we will be back next week with some more episodes for you. You can always sign up for our episode reminders on our Substack, or you could still sign up on our website at itsbookishtime.com. So without further ado, I wish you all a wonderful weekend. And until we see you again, stay bookish, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.